waste.
Hey, so I'm going to present a few announcements and a little bit information about what we're doing this month, and then I'm going to hand the mic to Daphne, who's bringing forth a new initiative for our committee. So one of our Zero Waste co-chairs who's unable to attend this morning, Christina Drexel, has taken a job in New York City, and she's going to be our New York Philly liaison going forward. She'll be continuing this with us as well, and she'll have some announcements next month. So we continue to work on our event guides, which we've been working on for quite a while. We're continuing to finish the checklists, and we've recently been studying how we may want to measure our event carbon footprint, so our waste and our footprint. And one fairly relevant event that we have studied was in a 2019 Design for Circularity conference in London. It had 490 participants, which compares really well with AIA Philly. You know, our typical design award events is about 500 people, so that's sort of equal to that. This was a one-day, 9-hour event, and they set up ground rules to ensure that they could limit their damage. They prohibited vendor tchotchke, which is a really big one. We all know that from our AIA conventions. They prohibited plastic. They provided tap water out of glassware, and their lunch menu was vegetarian. And the location was on the South Bank, a transportation hub at London's pedestrian riverfront. The most significant thing that we learned was that of the 490 participants, 487 of them arrived from across Europe and the outer regions of London via rail, subway, bus, on foot, and by bike. 3 of the speakers, of the 18 speakers, came from the US via airplane. This event had an 8 metric ton carbon footprint, and the environmental designer gave it, her audit gave it a C-. But what's really kind of exciting for us was that this is pre-pandemic. And the only way that they could envision, you know, how to make a significant improvement was in the area of food, which was actually only a half a ton in total. It was like, yeah, I think like 1,200 pounds or something like that. And so they had a 10% food waste, which was like 120 pounds of CO2, which is, you know, fairly insignificant. But when we like dug into the data of the audit, we saw that these 480 participants who came from around Europe only contributed 594 pounds of CO2, and the 3 speakers who came from the US via airplane contributed 4.25 metric tons of CO2 to this event. So they could have literally cut the event carbon footprint in half if these speakers had, you know, if they had been thinking about a virtual live stream or hybrid event. So I think this is like really food for thought as we go forward with our AIA convention and how we attend our events and plan our events. And now I'm going to segue to Daphne, who's working on this new initiative.
Hi, everyone. One of the things that we've been talking about and is growing momentum is the handling of construction and demolition waste. In this country, we generate 600 million tons of C&D waste, and only 22% of that goes into gets diverted from the landfill. So what this is doing is really contributing to greenhouse gas emissions and contaminating local water and air. And in light of the fact that there's a projection that we will be adding about 2.5 trillion square feet of more square footage in this country and generating more building waste, this is a very alarming statistic. So what we are hoping to do is to start a conversation and to educate ourselves about how we can better manage this waste stream, which is actually substantially more than solid municipal waste, which is, you know, daily garbage, you know, generated in domestic settings. There's an opportunity here to not only address what is the ramifications of this in our communities, but it's also an opportunity to look specifically at these materials. And there have been recent guidelines that came out by the federal government that, of course, are encouraging low carbon materials, but they're also encouraging materials with recycled content. So one of the things that we might start to talk about and to, again, educate ourselves about, because this is something that's growing and we're all learning about this simultaneously, is how can we better reuse these materials? How can we reuse building components? Perhaps find really good alternatives to demolition. And part of that is also designing for building disassembly. I mean, it's a lot to talk about, and we can only take it a little bit at a time, but this is where this momentum is going in this country, and it has actually been going on for quite some time overseas. So we'd like anyone who's interested to join us. I mean, this is a very little group, and there's an opportunity to dig in at very different levels, either specifically to materials. Each material is handled differently in terms of its waste and alternatives. Not every material has a market waiting for it to be reused. So there's a lot of creativity there that can be implemented in finding alternative strategies. Again, just to sum it up, that in diverting this waste, we are going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We will conserve resources that are quickly going to run out, and we're going to protect human health. So anyway, please join us. We haven't set an agenda yet or a schedule, but it's a conversation that I think is really important.